So we
Hi,
have
Amit.
with our co-host, I am Calcutta, Isel, I am Calcutta. So we have Nikhil Samarth and the complete team is here with us also. So they are our co-host for this event today, and so we have a variety of audience coming in. So we have IM students also joining in, as well as students who are there with YSN. They are also there. Okay, so just a quick brief on what exactly we do here. So every Sunday we have this entrepreneurship 360 series webinar series where we talk on the different aspects of entrepreneurship. YSN Youth Startup Network is a platform which is promoting youth entrepreneurship. So we are working with kids and students who are in the range of from 10 to 25. So we are working on different aspects of building up the entrepreneurial mindset as well as the entrepreneurial skill sets. So we have different programs with us which we are running. There are some competitions, there are some boot camps, there are some more programs which would be coming in. We are already running up in our idea pitch challenge. So a lot of students are joining us from there also. We have also done a pilot with Delhi government on the EMC curriculum, entrepreneurship mindset curriculum. So we have some of the students joining in from there as well. So all good to go. Amit, over to you. We can just have some introduction about Bivin, and then Bivin can take over the stage.
All right. Great. Thank you, Seeman. And thank you, everybody, for joining in today. Bibin, welcome. And
Thank you so much, Amit.
conversation with you today. Thank you for taking out that time for us. All right. So Bibin is I think, a guy who hits multiple
Welcome, Amit.
on his head. I mean, I see him as a guy who works with youth. He's a person who has extensive experience and expertise in blockchain technology. He's been an investor, and he has, I think, there are quite a lot of hats he has worn. So I will not go into all those hats because that's Vipin's first question from my side as well. But what I would say is that through his experience and through his, all the work that he has done over the years, he has gained tremendous experience and expertise in how ideas, how businesses, and how investments work, how to build and scale businesses is something that Bivin has extensively worked on. And today, when we talk to him, we will obviously get to know Bivin a lot more, and we will have a lot of questions around him, around his life. But at the same time, we are also going to touch upon what is angel investing and how it works, how funding has taken a new dimension after this COVID, and what lies in store once things start opening up. We are now in unlock X stage all the time, but maybe 6 months or maybe in a year down the line, how it looks like. So all these questions will also be something that we will ask Bivin today. And so please keep your questions coming all the time. Just put them in the chat room, and me and Simon will do our level best to make sure that each one of your questions is answered by Bibin today. So on that note, again, Bibin, thank you so much for coming today. And here is my first shot, my first question to you, because there's a lot of young kids on the webinar today. So let's start when you were a child. So how was your upbringing, and what was childhood all about, and what did you study, etc.? So just please share that part of your life with us first. All right, Bibin, can you hear me?
Thank you, Amit. Thank you for having me on this session. It's always it's always wonderful talking to the young folks. Of course, I'm young too. I'm I'm hoping that I'm audible because again and again it's coming that my connection is unstable. So not sure. Am I audible? Am I visible?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Perfect. So doing a great job, guys. Youth Startup Work. I was going through your FB, Insta, and stuff. good job. Please keep doing it. I mean, the ecosystem needs more and more. Right. Talking about, you asked me about my childhood. I probably, first thing to start with, I wish there was something similar like you startup network and similar programs when I was a kid. Probably it would have helped me much better. Right. So, I mean, my upbringing has been very, very common, just like most of us. I come from a middle class family, as a lot of us, and was always asked to do my studies well so that I get a good job. It's plain and simple. However, I think I was always trying to do something or the other, just to ensure that I have extra pocket money, and I need not depend on my parents. So I think that stayed, as a habit, and that led me to probably become an entrepreneur. So I'm an engineer. I did my engineering, and of course, post that I did my MBA in marketing and HR from South Wales. So, and that's been in terms of my studies. I mean, however, I did my first startup when I was in my college. So I started my first when I was in my second year of, actually about to be in the third year of my engineering. And even before I completed my engineering, I took an exit. Just before completing my engineering, I took an exit from that startup. And I keep telling this. I actually probably took an exit to get a job, and took up an opportunity globally in the tech zone. So we know them as Google. So that's where my corporate journey started, and I took some experience from there, so that that time I was not thinking it that way, but now when I look back, that little bit of corporate experience helped me figure out a lot of processes to run a company, right? And I think the valley was the right place to be at that time. Somebody who had no idea about that kind of an entrepreneurship world. It really went well, and I learned a lot from a lot of meeting a lot of startups there, and that's where my first investment also came into picture. Right, I made my first investment through AngelList whilst I was working in the valley, and meeting these startups day in and out, seeing fantastic people, fantastic startups happening there. That's what, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. That made me quit and quit my job and start again. But I wanted to come back and start here in India, and here I am back.
All right, and that's amazing, Bipin. And thank you for coming back to India. We don't want everybody sitting in Silicon Valley all the time. We want to have people in here in India with us. So great, thank you for doing that. And something interesting that just pops into my head as you shared this. While you started up in the college, and then for experience you went on to do a job. So as a college goer, what was running in your head at that point of time? There are so many questions we get from a lot of college students, and today we have a lot of students from IIM. They are very well regarded in terms of being great managers, and at the same time a lot of them are getting into entrepreneurship as well. So this question keeps on coming as to what to do actually, whether to take the plunge, not to take the plunge into entrepreneurship. So I want to hear your experience and maybe a reflection as to how you started and what was going in your head at that point of time.
See, to answer that, I think being an entrepreneur is also about taking calculative risks, right? When we are in college, our adrenaline rush is too high, and we think that whatever idea we have, whatever we are building, is the best, which is a good feeling to have. However, I a lot of time recommend to startups and their founders that if you are able to kind of get some experience working with maybe a startup whilst you start, before you totally get into building your own kingdom, that will really help, right? Having said so, having said so, we have seen that there are fantastic startups which got built uh, by people who have just graduated or not even graduated. So there is no fixed recipe to this, Amit. It totally probably what I would actually recommend is if you are in college and you're trying to build a startup, try and get a couple of mentors. One maybe a mentor who is a subject matter expert in the domain which you are building your startup, and maybe another mentor who can help you with other market studies. So if you have good mentors, they will actually be able to help you in deciding that do you take a plunge or not. If yes, when is the right time, right? But again, eventually it is you to decide. It is actually the entrepreneur's grid. It's totally up to them that when do they decide to start off. However, I very strongly believe that every graduate or to be graduate who has this knack of being an entrepreneur should give it a shot before they graduate, because they don't have too much things to lose by then.
Absolutely great advice, and I think you have nothing to lose or much to lose when you are in a college setting. But at the same time, I think you can tinker and play with any idea at that point of time. And people are just waiting a lot of times for that great super idea to come in. And I think this could fit in really well, that in college, whatever you feel is the value add, whatever is the problem that you would be able to solve, just get in and gain that experience. Doesn't matter what is the outcome. So fully resonates with a lot of youngsters, especially a lot of women students here are in school right now, and they have this dilemma all the time, because it's about schooling, it's about grades, and it's also about their interest in building something up. So any nugget of advice for them as well?
School kids, oh my god, I love to talk to kids in the school and they talk about running businesses. I feel envious a lot of times that we never probably had that guts to do it, or maybe we did it, but we don't know this is entrepreneurship. At least these days kids know that, yes, I mean, I'm trying to build a business. So what I'm really happy about these days is that networks like yours, I was talking to one yesterday, you guys are helping kind of build this entrepreneurial mindset at a very young age. And what's happening is one of my mentors tell me that the best thing which can happen to you as an entrepreneur at the very initial stage is to figure out that can you be an entrepreneur or not? Do you have it in you, right? And the young age is the best time to figure that out. You try a couple of things, you fail fast, or you kind of win at them, right? So as I mentioned earlier, it is definitely the best time as early as you can start, as an entrepreneur. Because the best thing which can happen to you is that you'll be in a clear position that do you have it in you? Do you have it in you to be an entrepreneur? The people with you are they fantastic? What do you need to do, right? Even if you're able to make that clear in your mind, I think half the journey is won. So even if post that you take a break and you say that, okay, now I'm just graduating, I'm going to be at school, be college, I'm going to take 5 years or 3 years, work with the corporate or work with startups, gain experience, build network, and then come back and launch a startup or an idea. That's even fantastic. My point is, if you reach that decision making point, that yes, this is the time I want to do it. I have resources. I'm all set. If decision, that's what is more important, and more early the better.
Great, thank you, Vipin, for saying that. All right, so I think Vipin, are you there? Okay, yes. So Vipin, my next question would be that while you're talking about at that young age, How about sharing something from your family? What are their backgrounds? Are they in business? Are you like a first kid to get into entrepreneurship? What's that story? What's that angle, if you could share with us?
Okay, yeah. So I am a first gen entrepreneur. There is so my parents have not been into business. So yeah, they prefer life, on a plain road. They're not crazy like me to have a roller coaster. Uh, so I mean, in the beginning they were not very supportive because of course, I had a fantastic job with a good paycheck, and all they wanted was their kid to be happy, and for them happiness is stability. uh, so from the background perspective, no, I'm a first gen entrepreneur, and I think that was fine. That's totally fine. Somebody has to start somewhere in their families, right? So in the beginning, of course, there was a lot of resistance, but I think gradually, with the good things which you do, which I have done, probably, uh, you know, they now do support me. So eventually, see, if they, what I want to tell kids now, or young folks now, is if they are with you, right, it is fantastic. If they support you, it's fantastic. If they don't, right, ensure that you work towards a way, and build your company in such a manner that eventually they become supportive of you. It both ways, it's perfectly fine. Right? I have seen fantastic first in entrepreneurs. Look at Byju's, right? He's a first in entrepreneur, and he's one of the fastest grown unicorns in our country.
Great, yeah. So, Bipin, just a little bit, when you just start up, so it's an initial plunge you take in. So, as today we see that you are have had you have had various hats. You have had different. Blockchain is one, co-working space is one, investing was one. So, what is the one thing which made you start that which thing you started, and how did you decided that okay, this is the thing where should I start?
Uh, okay, so how did I decide? Was totally on the basis of the need of the hour. So my first startup was actually an events company. It was an events platform altogether, and we did fantastic programs back then. I mean, one of my startups actually attempted to leave a world record, and so that time, and I was in a place where not too much of it was happening. I was in Jalandhar. I mean, it's a place in Punjab, right? And I thought, so I found that market to be really empty, and to be, so you know so lack of players made me decide that is a good idea or not. So for me, the criteria was that. However, there can be multiple other criteria to figure out the idea is good or not. One, uh, how niche it is, right? Is anybody else doing it? If else is doing it, I mean, how better can you do it, or how better are you doing it? Thirdly, I actually went down to ask a lot of my people whom I don't know, not the people who know me. I actually went out and asked about the idea to people who don't know me, so probably they can give a bit more honest feedback. And then I also tried and reached out to a few experts who are in similar industry, right, whom I look up to, and I asked, took their feedback. So and there were multiple things which I did around this to figure out. So these were a few basic ones which helped me decide that how should I start or not. And this is way back now. Now if I look into into that kind of a perspective, I believe uh, there are a couple of things which you should figure out to decide that is this the right thing to start. One is definitely especially in times like now, probably post COVID. One, that what you're trying to build, is it a must have startup, must have service, must have product, not a good to have. If it is just a good to have, then probably this is not the right time to start. If it is a must have, then yes, right? And if And then the second question comes at what kind of a market is there? Is it really small? Even if it is niche, is it just really small? Can you kind of scale it? Do you see that it will become a $1 million or $1 billion company? And once you see that, then once you believe in it, it's only then you can take other people on board, be it your customers, be it your investors, be it your team members, right? So quick hacks, must have product. Is it a enough market there available? Thirdly, are there existing players? If there are, how can you do better? Three basics. Of course, there are a lot of more, but these are three basics.
All right, great. So, Bipin, my next question would be for the benefit of everybody in the audience to just in a simple way understand what is blockchain. And you have been very active in that space. So, what exactly is blockchain technology and what it is beyond, let's say, Bitcoins? So, that is something that, if you could just throw a bit of light on.
See, blockchain is a very simple and very beneficial technology. It's actually a distributed ledger technology. How do we to help you understand it simple? It is actually records which are stored parallelly in multiple places, right? So that there is no dependency on one particular server or one particular owner of the data, and their data can be starting from just an Excel sheet to ownership of an asset, right? It is just a distributed ledger technology. Maybe someday we can have a quick session on blockchain in detail, right? But all I want to tell is that it is not just cryptocurrency. That is more important to tell people. It is not just cryptocurrency. However, I don't say that cryptocurrencies are not important. They are a fantastic use case of blockchain. Probably if there wouldn't have been cryptocurrencies, blockchain wouldn't have become popular, right? So blockchain, is again a technology which is giving back the power to the people. I truly believe that if there is a technology which removes all intermediaries, you need not put in trust on anybody particularly for any kind of activity or transaction happening, then that technology can actually change the world. I'll give a quick example. So you actually touched the wrong nerve. I am so passionate about blockchain that I can take a session of 24 hours continuously on that. So there's one use case which is very close to my heart. It's actually about supply chain of medicines, right? There has been studies by the World Health Organization that due to consumption of expired medicines or fake medicines, there are close to 100,000 plus deaths which happen every year globally, right? And which is a huge number, right? And in today's time, when we go back and we buy a medicine, all we can check is through the stamp which is there on the back side of it, that when was it manufactured, when does it get expired, correct? There's nothing beyond which you can do. And most of the time, there are a lot of times when people have actually forged that, and the companies have called back their medicines just because they are costly medicines. They sent it back into the market with newer dates, right? And that actually costs a lot of deaths. There are times wherein they've shifted the location of the medicines, with the changed dates. People consume it, in the second world countries. With blockchain, just imagine that there's going to be just a QR code, which is started implementing now. You can just scan it over any random mobile phone which has a camera, and you can actually see that where did it originate from, when did it originate from, starting from their raw materials, the expiry of their raw materials, what is the best time to consume it, right? What is an okay time to consume it? What is the time when you should not consume it, right? So if blockchain is a technology which is actually has the potential of saving lives, and there are endless use cases, starting from ownership of land. If a technology can save people, lives of farmers from killing themselves just because they are in land conflict, it's fantastic, right? There are countries which are trying to implement blockchain in voting systems. There's going to be no fraudulent activities in voting systems. talking about students, in their lives, there are countries and institutions which have started implementing blockchain in degree certificates, right? And reason that, again, there's a study which says that every year there is close to 200, I mean more than 2 lakh. I don't remember the exact number. More than 200,000 degrees, graduation degrees, which are fake, which are created fake by fake universities, right? And eventually, which actually means that we are killing the opportunities of 200,000 eligible students, right? So there are countries and institutions implementing blockchain in that, which ensures that there are no fake degrees. So that's where we actually started. So my first product which I built was something called as ProCert, which ensure that there is going to be no fake degrees.
All right.
So yes, too much. I mean, I can go on. I mean, today's session is about funding entrepreneurship. We'll stick to that.
All right, great. Thank you, Vivin, for sharing that. And okay, let's jump on to funding. So for the benefit of all our viewers, I would first want you to share what exactly is angel funding and at what stage it comes in the whole cycle of the business. And a connected question with that would be that, when as a founder, you're ready to take on investment. So if you could share, start from there.
All right. So, first of all, I would start with the notion that please don't make the fundraising as your objective. That's the note I want to start with. However, what is angel investment? See, angel investment is just selling your dream and your idea to people who are as crazy as you. That's how I explain philosophically. However, if you talk about it in terms of numbers, angel investment at various places ranges from amount to amount. So I kind of feel that angel investment is anything where you're trying to raise money, maybe up to a crore if you talk about in Indian terms. And when do you need an angel investor? Is probably when you have, as per me, it's when you have done your MVP at least. It's beyond an idea stage, and you're done with your MVP. You have tested your product, and now you need money to scale it up, or to survive, or to give it, or just go into the market and play in a hole. So that's angel investment for me. However, I very strongly recommend that reach out to angel investors in today's time when you have some revenue. That is the way I look into it. There will be a few investors who disagree to it, but for me, very clearly, and to a lot of us, see, because angel investors are not people with, say, probably multi-billion dollars. They are not venture funds, right? So we try and partner with startups on their dreams, right? So we are going to be more close-knit to the founders, much more than any VC fund, right? So if to answer your question in crisp terms, one, angel investment comes into place when you have your MVP ready, or you're already in the market. You have some paying customers. Now you need money to survive and to scale up from there. Secondly, angel investment is also a strategic partnership with people who can help you grow your business. Especially when an angel investor comes and puts in money, he would not be putting in money. He will also help you build your business or scale your business through his contacts, through his network, through his expertise which he has had in the past, right? So yes, if you're trying to raise anything between probably 25 lakhs or 50 lakhs to 1.5 crore, that's where angel investment comes into play, right? And please ensure that you're only going to the angel investor when you need money and not just when you want money.
Right.
When you really need money to probably expand, you need money to have another store, you need money to hire a resource which is very crucial for your product, you need money to probably market it the right way, you need money to add to your inventory. So these are things when you decide that you need angel investment.
Right. Great. Thank you. So now let me ask you a question, let's say from the other side of the table, that as a founder, you shared what it is, but as an angel investor, how, the mind would work, and what would you keep on looking in the idea, in the business, or in the founder, if you could share some light there.
All right. So again, this would have various perspectives from various people. However,
All
I
right,
think
we
there was
have you
something
back.
wrong. Yeah, I think there was something went wrong.
Right.
So your question was, what are investors looking at? Very clearly, at a seed level or an angel level, we look at majorly three things. One is team. Team, kind of becomes very important. The market and the product. To be very, basic. These are three things. When I say team, we look at founders, right, and the early team. It's not just the founders. I mean, we also look at the early team of if there is an early team. Then when we say team, we look at that what kind of a market fit is the founding team right now. So one is the market fit of the idea, one is the market fit of the founders, right? So why are you the best ones to run this? All right. And then, talking about the market, we want to know that how big is the market. You say that, it's a niche market, but then even if it is niche, how big is it? Do we see that it can be scaled up? Do we see that 10x, 50x, and so on and so forth? All right. However, at an angel level, I will again and again emphasize, we majorly focus on how fantastic is the founding team, right? The founder market fit. What are the core functional expertise? Are they good at the product? Are they good at engineering? Are they good at design? Are you good at tech? I mean, and especially look. You should also look at the combination of your team. So if you're a tech startup, then you should probably at least have two people, who's expert in that particular tech, right? And then you should have the unique insights into the problem which you're trying to solve, right? And a lot of times, a lot of angel investors do this. They check that how best you can articulate. In fact, in the Valley, they say that, idea behind a visiting card. Can you explain your business model on the back of a visiting card, right? So coming back to the question, however, so team, market, and the product, right? And when I say product, now I will emphasize, when I say product, we are very, very particular about what is the customer's review on it, how much the people love your product. Customer love is the most important, at an angel level investment. Not just angel level, probably even more, but team, market, and product love comes as the priority for angel investors.
Great. Thank you, Vivin, for sharing that. Now we have, we have seen so much happening in the news around investment all these years, with big bucks flowing as we see investments. But the angel investment space has also grown tremendously. Now we have fresh set of people coming in all the time. Now, what has it's like a thriving ecosystem that was building in, and how COVID changes this. I want your perspective on that.
Yeah, COVID does change a little because there is a lot of uncertainty. I mean, the startups don't know where they are going. We don't know the behavior of the customer. That the behavior of the customer is changed temporarily or is it changed permanently. Investors don't know, that a particular industry which was doing amazing in the last 6 months, will it do it? Will it do the same in future. So it has impacted a lot. I mean, not just the startup ecosystem, it has impacted everybody. I mean, as we know it, right? And the first thing which we need to understand is that this is going to stay for a while. This is going to stay for a while. We need to evaluate the scenario. So first of all, if a startup is trying to raise money right now, we need to evaluate the startup. Even in a couple of sessions, I was talking about this. Majorly, there is impact because of two reasons. One is the health reasons. Second is the financial reasons. When I say the health reasons, people are using some of the services or products, yes or no, because there is an impact on their health. They worry about their health. For example, hospitals business is impacted a lot, not because people are not getting sick these days. Because the customers, the patients are reluctant to hit the hospitals, right? So that's the first reason you need to evaluate on that. Is your startup impacted? Is your company impacted because of the health reasons? Are customers not paying because of that? The second broader reason is that is it because people don't want to spend much right now? Your customers don't want to spend much now, or they feel poorer. I was telling somebody yesterday, the billionaires are behaving like millionaires now. Millionaires are behaving like people with $100,000. So evaluate the scenario. If you fall in the first category, if there is impact because of the health reasons, then you need to probably pivot permanently or temporarily to stay in the business, and then if you go and try and raise money, it would be a little more easy. If it is the second reason that it's just because of the money reasons or the financial reasons that people are not buying it, they don't feel it's affordable, or it is not a must-to-have product right now, then I think you should try and hold on, wait, don't just die, raise some money, and then you can reach out to the customer, cut down on your cost, and then go out to the investor. However, having said so, there are startups there which have raised money in COVID times, and they will continue raising money in the post-COVID times also. Hello.
Yeah, Bipin, please continue.
Yeah. So there are a few sectors which I think which are good for angel investment and investments in the current scenario. Probably it's going to take for another 6-9 months. Like edtech, digital health, e-commerce, remote work and collaboration tools. Of course, the health industry altogether, gaming, nutrition and hygiene. If you are building a SaaS product, which is a must-have. These are sectors which are doing good, which are raising money, and if you are into it, it is a perfectly good time to raise money. There are a few sectors which are not doing good, and you might face too many challenges in raising money, such as travel, international travel, hospitality industry, offline retail sector, traditional food and beverages, fashion and accessories. If you're into cineplexes or anything which enables them, if you're into real estate, such as co-working, if you're into gig economy, such as ride sharing. So these sectors, you will face challenges in raising money. The ones which I previously told, those would be fine. However, to answer your question on a whole, in general, not a great time to raise money. It's going to be tough, but then if you're in these industries which I said, I think there is no holding back.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so let's change our course a little, and I want to ask you your experience about AngelList, and how did that come through, and how was your experience about that? Because that's something that a lot of people are interested in nowadays.
So there was some disturbance, Amit, so I didn't get your entire question. If I'm not wrong, you're asking how was my experience with angel investment?
Yeah, AngelList. Yeah, I
with
wanted to know
AngelList.
AngelList. Yes.
It's been a while. I've not been very active with AngelList. However, my first experience as an investor started with AngelList, and that was fantastic. That was really fantastic. Uh, so there's this very popular company called as Snapchat. So that happened to be one of my initial investments when I was in the US. There was a company called as Shopee, which happened through AngelList. So my experience with AngelList has been great. Because there is a dedicated team which keeps communicating to you, about all the ups and downs of that startup. They keep highlighting that there are exit options. So that's been there's been a lot of trouble which you save yourself from, especially when you're starting, right? So similarly in India we have fantastic networks now, India Angel Network, right? We have Lead Angels, Mumbai Angels. There's a lot of other angel investor actually do that for you. So so my answer to that is that I had a good experience, and I would recommend to a lot of first time investors on AngelList. Especially if you're in other countries. If you are in India, then there are other lot of other networks which you can utilize.
Okay, great. So just moving on forward, Bipin, there's one question which comes up commonly. Everybody has this question, that what is the kind of agreement a founder goes in with the angel fund, the investor. So a little bit about. I don't want you to go very much detail. Term sheet is the thing, but I'll just a little bit, just an overview of, so that students know what is the idea about.
See, majorly angel investments, happen on equity level. So it's an equity-based investment. Of course, there are multiple types of investments. There is a debt equity, there is equity, there is just debt, right? And there are investments for profit. However, so you're talking about the agreement. So it's technically, about just allocating some share. I mean, whatever shares which you have agreed to, to that investor in lieu to the money on the basis of the valuation which you have done, mutually agreed, right? And you decide on a course of action where the money is going to come as one, as one tranche is going to come as two tranches or multiple tranches, right? And if there are agreements wherein there's an exit also kind of defined, that 3 years, 5 years, there's also going to be an exit for the investor. So majorly, I know it's around these only. However, I will recommend one of my friends to do a session specifically probably for you. I can ask him on the agreements of angel investments. In fact, a lot of my agreements are done by him, right? A lot of my portfolio companies. So, you might know him also. His name is Amit from Single from Startup Buddy. Probably he's one of the best guys to talk about agreements. I am not great at that, right?
Okay, so we have a lot of questions pouring in. So we are going to open up now space for asking all the viewers questions to you. And I think I have a question that I can see from Surjit. So I'm jumping the queue, so Seeman, so please bear with me. The question that he has asked is that what, from a founder's perspective, what do you look in, from an angel? And, is it just the temperament or some certain other commonalities? What do you actually, as a founder, who want to take the money from?
Okay, so what do we look in the founders? That's probably you are trying to ask.
No, Bipin, the question is that as a founder, what would you look at in the angel?
Oh, okay, that's a fantastic question. See, if I'm at an early stage, then I would look at somebody who is not just there to give me money. First things first is not just money is what I require, right? I would need somebody who would actually want to support me grow my business. Right? I will go back and also do some kind of a ref check on the investor also, right? That if in the previous investments which he has made, uh, what is the feedback from those founders? How is the way he works with the founders? I mean, is he close knit, or is he just number driven? Is he into micromanagement, so on and so forth, right? So I always keep telling the startups that please evaluate your investor also, right? So I will evaluate the investor on these perspectives. One, that how much can he help? What background does he come from, right? And what does the market talk about him? What does his investees talk about him? All right, uh, and how passionate he is about supporting startups.
Okay, so starting with the audience questions again, we have a question from Tarun Kohli. He asked about how you started and how did you took up the funding route. So did you bootstrap your venture in initial days, or if you sought funding, at what stage did you thought that it should be taken?
I'm a huge fan of bootstrapping, Simant. My initial companies have always been bootstrapped, uh, right? So I'm a firm believer that your customers needs to be your investors. And if customers become your investor, you don't need anybody else's money, right? So most of my companies have been bootstrapped. With InnoWork, we have raised some money, right? With one of my companies, now we are raising some money. It's called Espeza. It's a blockchain payment platform. So in the initial journey, I never raised money. Not at all. Was not a fan of it. However, with InnoWork, it was pretty easy. There was we got this gentleman who was really passionate about the co-working industry, and though we were not requiring too much of money, right? We just wanted some money to expand a few more locations. So that's why we reached out to him. We actually reached out to him for support, and he was interested that to kind of partner with us and also become an investor. So otherwise, no. For me, I haven't have a raising too much of a raising experience. I have helped people raise money. I have given money to people, but I have not raised too much money in my journey. But soon, yes, I will too.
Great. So we have a question from Sankalp, and he wants to know about incubation. So he says, how to decide if your startup should take help from incubation, and what are the cons of getting incubator too early?
See, if you're at a very early stage, so if you're at an idea stage, even your MVP is not ready. If that's the case, then an incubation is fantastic idea. Go for incubation, right? Because an incubator will help you with a lot of things and not just probably give you some money to build it. So they will give you help you with tech. They will help you with creating that framework on which the startup needs to work on. They will help you with the team. They will help you with other infrastructural supports. They will get you a lot of experts. So if you're at an idea stage and an MVP level stage, an incubation is a fantastic idea. It helps you grow. All right. So clear answer to that. If you are already at a revenue stage, right, then you need to think that why do you need, so where all do you need support? So if it is around tech and there is a tech incubator, you believe that you cannot kind of afford a lot of tech folks right now, but you still need to improve on your tech, then you should get incubated with a tech incubator, right? And again, I mean, once you are post revenue and you're doing really good, your unit economics are fantastic. You don't need an incubator. I think incubations are only required at early stages, or probably to put it in numbers at the initial 2 to 3 years of your startup.
Okay, so we have another question from Pawan Priyatham Bhuvangiri. It says that in regards to early points in discussion, how does an early stage startup think about long-term behavioral changes that it can bring in its potential, that it becomes a must-have kind of a product? So he gives an example of Swiggy and Uber, and other unicorns who have turned, massive. They were born during the time, after the financial crisis, and at that point of time, they were just good to have products. But later on, they became a must-have products.
Okay, so you cannot predict this, my dear friend. For example, a lot of people tell that Paytm's exponential growth happened because of demonetization, right? So you cannot predict something like that, right? So why I said you should have a must-have product, I am talking in terms of the current scenario. The current scenario, people are only buying things which are either essentials or must-to-haves. People are investing in companies which are which have products and services which are a must-to-have. So my perspective is that. However, just to answer your question, how can you foresee? It's totally depends on the expert study which you have made on that particular sector, right? For example, people are able to kind of predict it very much early because we were going towards that age. You need to figure out why now. How do we do that? For example, Khata book. If you know this, right? They became now massive because there was a lot of geo implementation and adoption which happened. It actually became big because of geo, right? And geo has actually made a lot of other products are good, more than good to have. So you need to actually study the market. Meesho became so good, so big because of WhatsApp, right? So firstly, it is very important that it's the right time, and if it is the right time, how do you figure that out? It's totally on the basis of the research and study which you make in that sector. Can you predict it? That will probably become a must-to-have. I doubt that can happen at any stage.
Right. All right. So we'll shift a gear here, and we have a question from Amika. Amika is one of our students in the Pitch Challenge, and she is in class 6 right now. So she asks you, and actually she comments you first and says that it's great and remarkable that you're doing a superb job building world-class blockchain experiences. And she wants to know what is your greatest strength, which abides you to move ahead successfully. And she also wants to know what is your greatest fear.
Okay, so Amika, first of all, I am, I would say, rather say, motivated and inspired by kids like you who are getting into this kind of a journey. Really heartwarming. I wish that I had that kind of intellect and grit which you people have today. So fantastic on that, and keep going. So you to ask your question, to answer your question, what is my biggest strength? My biggest strength is that I don't give up. I don't give up at all, right? Secondly, my strength is my people. It's my people who work with me, who love me, who believe in my dreams and my ways. So my team, that's my strength. My people, my supporters, they are my strength. So not giving up, my team, right? And I have totally good belief on my research and study which I do. So knowledge. All right. So my three strengths, which I want to emphasize again, to reiterate, is my confidence in myself, my people, and my knowledge. Right. My fear, I don't know. That's a tough question to answer. I fear not having an answer, right? So that's just candid. I don't know. I fear something, a pandemic like this once again. That would impact businesses. When I say pandemic, I'm talking about disruption, right? I fear that, but then and that fear is good. That fear helps me be more strong, right? I know it's a philosophical answer, but I'm sorry, Amika, I cannot give you a clear answer on my fears. Uh, Probably it is revolved around my strengths itself, right? That will my people leave, the best people, or will my knowledge will not be enough uh, in coming times? So, but I'm sorry, Amika, I cannot give you a clear answer on that. But on my strengths, I'm very sure.
No, sir, it's okay. Thank you so much.
I think Bibin would have told that time in mila fear ka. We are just cruising along our journey.
No, I mean, I think there are too many, maybe, or maybe I don't care about what I fear about.
All right. So I have another question, Bibin. That is again from Rohan, and he's also one of the students. And he asked that he has created an app, and now how can I fund his app? So a little unclear on the question, but his question is that how can he fund his app, and how can he sort of push it forward? So maybe you could just also touch base upon how the app system works, maybe some perspective.
See, I mean, it's not about just the app ecosystem altogether. It is about what does that app do, right? How much adaptability will it have? How much people will love it, use it? To answer the question in simple ways, if it is an early stage level, and you need money, I think you should initially reach out to your friends and family, right? That's the first people who would try and help you and support you. So I mean, it's very commonly said, friends, family, and fools, at these stages. So reach out to them, and I think the initial level, it shouldn't be tough. If you're able to convince these people, they will support you. And once you have tested it, there are good uses. You're creating revenue, or that this is the right way you're going to make revenue. Then you can reach out to individuals at angel level investors or seed investors. I don't know at what stage your app is, so I cannot give you a clear answer. But I think the app ecosystem here is here to stay for a little more while. It's gonna be here. However, we are moving towards the API level, the API era altogether. But still, there is good scope on apps. Right? If you see any unicorns today, they are on the app. Right? They are on the app. So especially because the mobile, the mobile real estate has become a little more cheaper. Right? That people are okay to download apps. So having said that, I don't know. I cannot give you a clear answer on that. Maybe you can get me a little more idea about what the app is, and I can give a more answer. But that sector is doing good right now. Initial funding, reach out to your friends, family, and friends. That's the best. If that doesn't work out, try and reach out to the incubators. If that doesn't work out, or it does work out, reach out. There are a lot of grants. There are a lot of government grants which are there. We can reach out to them. Maybe we can. I can send some details on that later on, which can be shared to you people. Right.
Okay, great, Vipin. So we have our next question coming in from Surjit. He says, what are the major founder and investor partnership models that you see in the Indian startup landscape? And as a founder, how can you reach these angel investors?
Okay, so the first question first. Majorly, the arrangement is totally put in mutual. That see, eventually somebody who's put in money majorly looks back on the returns which is going to have, right? Not too much beyond that. However, there are startups wherein the investor gets too much connected to them, with the theme they're working on, with the larger good. So the investor actually partners in helping them grow. Majorly, it is around giving money to you at the right times and helping you connect you the market in a better way to other investors. Because eventually, if I put in money into somebody or some startup, I need to ensure that that money is safe and it grows and I get my exit sometime in future. So the partnerships are very, very mutual. It depends from case to case. For example, there is one startup wherein I invested. It's a pre-revenue startup, right? My commitment to them was money in 3 tranches, and uh, my anticipated exit in 5 years. And the partnership also talks about getting them trying and helping them get more users, and there's a set number which we have put to that, right? That these are number of users which I will try and get for them. There's another startup wherein I have only put money and I only help them connect to the inventory folks, people who can give them more and more inventory. So the partnership totally varies at an angel level. At an angel level, it totally varies. And to answer your question on the angel networks, where do you get these angels? Firstly, you should actually attend a lot of events these days, virtual events, right, of these angel investors. It actually helps. Angel investors are the good people. They are okay to listen to people. They're okay. They are looking for startups which do good. Wherein they're looking for opportunities to invest money. Apart from that, there are angel networks like India Angel Network, Chandigarh Angels, Chennai Angels, India also, IIF, HA, CIA Angel Network. There are too many. Mumbai Angels, NAN, Venture Catalyst, R Ventures, so many. So you can just look for them, over the web, over LinkedIn, try and connect to them. They actually respond. I mean, a lot of times we respond. I rather say most of the times we respond. So it's not very tough to find angel investors. It might be tough to strike a conversation with them. That totally depends on how well you reach out to them. Don't just say hi, hello, how are you doing, right? And there has to be a midway. You cannot just even straight send that. Okay, I'm looking for money. Will you put in money? Right. So there has to be a midway. You need to find that synergy with him, right? Talk to him on some context, do some research over him or her, right? If it's on LinkedIn, there are a few ways. There are some smart ways, right? Probably if he's posting something on his LinkedIn, try and connect to him on that perspective. If he has done some article, kind of give him some feedback on that. So there are multiple ways of smartly doing all of this. Right. On that note, Amit, I would have a hard stop in 3 minutes. I have a call.
Right, Bipin. No problem. So we'll just squeeze in maybe a question, and maybe I'll just pick out something which is more generic. So Surjit, your follow-up question will take up later. Maybe offline, I'll send Bipin an answer on that. He will maybe reply. And then I have a question. Maybe that could be one. Would be from Kalyani. Again, I wanted to ask that because that brings in a social investing perspective as well. So Kalyani is again one of our Pitch Challenge students, and she's asking that lot of ideas don't work. They have a lot of time where they actually become fruitful. So the gestation periods are high. So how do you look at investment in those areas? And I'm just connecting another question with her. Question is, especially in social startups, how do angels look at them?
Okay, so to answer that question, I've been supporting a couple of startups which are social ventures. However, the angel investors support these social ventures on an emotional ground. That if we feel connected to whatever they're doing, and we thought that we could have done something in that arena, or we wish to help that sector. Because eventually social startups don't make too much of money, right? I don't know if I'm sounding hard and rude here, but that's the truth, right? So So an angel investor, kind of invests. They don't too much. There aren't too many angel investors who invest in social ventures, right? Tough to find. However, again, if you're able to sell the story, if you're able to sell the story and have him or her on board about the greater good which you are doing, right, and also by surviving, because it shouldn't be a total CSR kind of an activity which is happening. Eventually, with his or her money, the startup should become self-reliant and self-dependent. If that's possible, then the angel investor will put in money. Or else it's going to be tough to get money from his pocket for your social venture. Right. And the first question was about that there's going to be some time wherein gestation period wherein the startup is going to take time. So how do we look at it? That is perfectly fine. That is perfectly fine. All we need to know is that are you a right market fit startup? Do you have the right team to do it? Right. And eventually, will your unit economics be fine? Whichever way you're moving ahead. So if that is sorted, we are fine with the gestation period. The angel investors are fine. We don't want the returns the first day. We don't want the X growth the next day. It's totally fine. But then it cannot totally go on a burn. It cannot be on a burn mode forever. Especially post-COVID times, investors are interested in startups which can stop the high burn ASAP.
Right. Great. Thank you. Right, Bibin. So we'll not take much of your time here, but one parting request coming in from all the students as well. How can they be connected with you, and how could we facilitate? So we are, looking at great mentors like you. So request coming in from everybody to you that maybe you could find time later and be on a shorter discussions around mentoring these young students.
Surely, Amit, and I would want to thank you for having me today on the session to answer the kids' question. Guys, please, you can connect to me on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I am active on both the places really, really well. It is I am Bibin Babu. Reach out to me. The best thing I do is before I sleep, I do respond to as many messages as I can on LinkedIn and on Instagram both. So these are two places where I am more active. Right. So feel free to reach out to me. Right. Trust me, if not 24 hours, 48 hours, you will get a response.
All right.
So for everybody's reference, I have just put LinkedIn's profile, Bibin's LinkedIn profile in the chat. So there is a link, you can access that, and else, finding him is easy. Just type, as I said, I am Bibin Babu.
Yes.
You'll get it.
Great.
So thank you so much, Amit. Thank you so much, Seemat, and thanks everybody for joining. It was fantastic talking to you. I loved it on a Sunday. I didn't want it to end this, but I have a call already which has started coming in. So I will have to.
Thank you. Thank you, Bibin. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.